So I didn't start dabbling in anything new age until maybe high school. I started doing yoga. But before then, like middle school, adolescence, that's just when the trauma hit. That's when depression hit me around age 13, self-harm, and just intense emotions that probably had something to do with hormones.
Yeah.
So as those hormones spiked, like everything just intensified, and it feels like the floodgates opened, and this stuff that I didn't know how to process as a kid just came up and out. And that was the beginning of my searching for something to help me with that, to heal me, to help me understand what's going on and why I'm feeling this way. And that led me into self-help, psychology. I studied neuroscience in college, that whole world.
Yeah.
And before that, even in high school, I started meditating and doing yoga.
Okay.
That was probably the start of it. Now that I think of it, I was introduced to yoga through my school. We had senior year, I think it was the first year, we had the option to choose our fitness class. So one of the options was, I think it was called mindfulness, but it was like yoga and meditation and vision boards and all of that. In retrospect, I think that opened the door to yoga for me. Like, I think I didn't really do it until then. I think I looked at poses online or something, but I didn't know what it was. I would just like hold downward dog for a minute and then stop. And that was my yoga.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do it. And then that class in school taught me that. And then I started meditating and doing yoga, and along with my self-help, because it's all kind of one world. Once you enter the self-help world, it steers you in that direction, right?
I heard you say in your testimony too, like you got into veganism, and then as you were like researching veganism, that sort of opened the other spiritual reasons for veganism. So that was something I wanted to ask you about too, was all these sort of doorways into the new age that we think are innocent, but then, you know, like you said, once you enter that world, it's all kind of in the same world.
Yeah. And I mean, I used to scoff at my dad, but I think that is how he views marijuana, for like a gateway into other drugs, right? And I started smoking weed when I was 14, same age as all this stuff hit me, basically. Like, I was depressed, all this trauma was coming up. I wanted to harm myself. I wanted to end my life. I wanted to make the pain go away. I got really sexual. I sought out boys. I started smoking weed. I started drinking. All these things were kind of together in this attempt to fill this void and make this pain go away and make it better. Right? This was all kind of one experience. And then the self-help direction felt like a healthier way to deal with those things, as opposed to going the drug route, which I knew was bad. That's the thing, is like, we're taught in society that route is bad. We're not taught that new age is bad. So anyway, the veganism came in college. So after my first year of college, which was probably my most intense year of depression at the time, as I said in my testimony, like on my page, it kept getting worse every year. The depression would come back heavier and more debilitating. And I felt more kind of apathetic and just like unable to do anything. It was more lie in bed and wallow, and wallow is not even the right word. It felt like everything just felt pointless. There was a purposelessness to it. So every year that purposelessness got heavier. And after that year, because again, it was worse than ever, I went even deeper into self-development. Like, how do I fix this? How do I make this better? Like, I can't live like this. So I got deeper into self-development, and I was always into health. Like, I thought I was so cool and smart and awesome when I was like 12 years old and working out 3 times a day. I was, in retrospect, it was all coming from this place of not enough. It was all coming from this place of worthlessness, and I need to do these things to be a good person, to be worthy, to be joyful, like to function, to exist. In retrospect, that's why I did the things I did. But that's what led me to veganism, is this like interest in health and self-improvement and fixing myself. I thought I was deeply broken. I thought that I was a bad person inherently. I remember when I was 7 years old, this was when I still was living in Russia. I think my dad had already moved at this point. He moved ahead of us to kind of set us up. So I think he was already gone. My mom and I were still living in Moscow for a few months. And I was 7 and I made up this make believe game, like where I would 1 second pretend, like make believe that I was my best friend at the time. Her name was also Anastasia, very common name there. And then I would switch on a dime and be me, this
Okay.
Anastasia. And when I was her, I was the most obedient, like good girl you could possibly imagine, like my concept of what it meant to be a good person.
Mhm.
And when I would switch to me, I behaved like the devil. Like I was chaotic and rude and cruel and disobedient, all these things. And that's the self concept I held. I thought I was this inherently bad person. And I carried that with me up
Mm.
until like the last several months, where really I feel like Jesus pulled me out of that and showed me how worthy I am in his eyes.
Mhm.
So all of this stuff I was doing was trying to fill that void of worthlessness, and even beyond worthlessness, feeling like I was inherently just awful as a human.
Yeah. And that's sort of a good recognition of like our fallenness and the fact that, we are sinful humans, but then there's a couple different approaches from that point of, okay, so the way we should go is I need Jesus, but B, the way many of us end up going for many years until we just keep finding emptiness there is trying to fix it and heal it ourselves. So you ended up, going down route B until it led you back to route A. So tell us a little bit about, you know, I want to know about the shadow work exercise that you did. You said it was like a 3-day um sort of like retreat for shadow work where you encountered Jesus. Was that your first time encountering him?
Yes. So let me clarify a little bit. After veganism, I kind of dove into the world of law of attraction because the YouTubers I found who were vegan were also into that. So that I landed there, and then that deepened into the shadow work world because one of those YouTubers who was vegan, she started her YouTube channel as a vegan channel, then made it a law of attraction channel, and then took ayahuasca and went that whole route and created a shadow work program based on her ayahuasca experience. So
Okay.
that's what it was rooted in. It was this like shamanic,
Mhm.
aka demonic shadow
Yeah.
work program. It wasn't a retreat. It was virtual. It was like an online course. So it was a recording, like a guided ceremony.
Okay.
And I practiced that for 3 nights in a row. She suggested doing it several times on the full moon.
Okay.
So that's what I did. And it wasn't the first one, maybe it was like the second or third, but sometime in that period, I heard the voice of God. I didn't have a visual of God or Jesus. I don't remember what I had a visual of. I remember a lot of experiences that came up from my memory,
Mhm.
but there weren't a lot of supernatural visuals. It was mostly my life.
Okay.
And there was one point at which I think I was seeing nothing at this point. I think there was no visual attached to it. And I just very audibly heard the voice of God. I don't remember what he said, but it was the first time, I think the only time now that I've heard him audibly, and
Okay.
the first time I've ever heard him at all. At that point, I probably would have considered myself atheist
Mhm.
or maybe agnostic, but very close to atheism because I believed in supernatural. I believed in ghosts. I believed in things of that nature, but I don't know if I believed in God at that point.
Yep. Yep.
And this was also my rock bottom emotionally. Like this was that last cycle of depression I had. I didn't know it would be my last, but it was the last cycle of depression I had, and it was the heaviest. And my now husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, and I like that was the only light in my life was having him there, and that was really rocky and not going well because I was such an emotional wreck.
Mm.
And I what's was it Tim Keller? I forgot who it is, but there's a quote by a man that goes something like, "Helplessness, not holiness, is the way into the presence of God," something
Yeah.
like that.
Yes. Is
Yeah,
Tim Keller? Because I recognize that and I love Tim Keller, so that it might be, and rest in peace. I just heard he passed last week. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, oh my gosh. But yeah, that's an amazing quote.
Yeah, so I that really felt like my helplessness moment where I experienced God because I was at rock bottom, and then I didn't really start to believe in him in I mean, I believed in him, I believed in his existence, but I didn't pursue him
Mhm.
in the way that I do now, certainly, but really in any way. What I pursued was more of these practices,
Yeah.
pursued more shadow work. Oh, this worked. I came out feeling so joyful and so good and
Mhm.
not depressed, and for the first time ever feeling alive and purposeful. And this is amazing. And this must have worked. And I got to tell everybody about this. So that's what I did. That's how I ended up in coaching, as I started telling everybody about this experience online. And then I dove deeper into inner child work and masculine, feminine energetics and all this stuff. And at the root of my philosophy behind it all was shadow work, was that we have to unconditionally accept every single part of us,
Mhm, mhm.
and that essentially that nothing is bad. So
Yes.
it really came crashing down when I came to Jesus and I realized there was a bad. That was like a whole earth shattering
Gosh.
moment for me.
I know exactly what you mean. That's like when I saw a demon, it made me realize like, oh, demons are actually real. Like there actually is spiritual bad out there. And that was, yeah, an earth-shattering moment. That was the first time I prayed to Jesus in over 2 years. But I was of that same ideology, and that's sort of what the New Age teaches is everything is good. You just accept everything as it is. You are the sky, not the weather, and just all of this, very just vague, um, just like blatant acceptance of everything, even of what is wicked.
Yeah. When I first came out of that and I learned that there is a light and a dark and an evil and a good, and whereas previously, for example, I believed in demons,
Mhm.
um, I didn't have a firm understanding. I had two lines of thought on what they were. One was they're not real. They're projections of our own inner
Yep.
darkness
Yep.
that we perceive, like we can perceive as very, very real, but they're actually just parts of us.
Yep.
And then the other line of thinking was, oh, they're real, but they they don't have any power over you
Mhm.
if you're basically like loving. So what I did is I would love them away.
Yeah.
I would tell them I love you, I love you, I love you, and thinking that that would scare them away. And in my mind, like in my experience, it did. And I don't know if it was them just like appeasing me and playing with me and still controlling me in the background or what that was, but that
Think.
was my practice at the time.